So in today's gospel reading, we find ourselves face to face with what seems to be an alter ego of Jesus. The Jesus we know, the what a friend we have in Jesus. Let the little children come to me, Jesus is gone and replaced with what appears to be a cold, unresponsive, and cruel man. It is no wonder that so many find this text difficult to read. And many are quick to come up with explanations for his behavior. Oh, he was just testing her. Just testing that woman. Many scholars I've read begin by voicing their apprehension and discomfort at this particular passage, especially the first part of this passage. What are we to make of this Jesus? Where do we find the loving, comforting healer we all know and we all relate to in light of this more unflattering description? It's like we've glimpsed behind the curtain and the sight ain't pretty, and we cry out, please, oh God, return us to the Jesus we know post haste. Yet this Jesus, this glimpse, has much to teach us as well. So while some recoil at this text, I love it. I love this text. This is one of my favorite texts within canon. And the character of the one who is not even given the honor of a name, rather is described by her geographical region, she's described by her otherness, is perhaps my favorite character within all of Scripture. Because she changes the outcome not only of her daughter's story, but perhaps Jesus' own ministry as well. I love this text, not because of where Jesus begins, but where he finds himself at the end of his encounter with her, and how his life is impacted by the unnamed woman's dedication to her child. To understand just how critical this story is for Jesus' ministry within the Markan text, we have to look at the larger context of what's happening. Now, I am not sure how many of you are thrilled and awakened by contemplating the literary structure within Scripture. Whoa, I heard a woo. We got one, we got a couple. So for you, those of you who this is not your thing, hang on, we won't be here for very long. And for those of you who love this, your woos out there, I apologize, we won't be here very long. Either way, I'm going to need you to stick with me. In Mark's gospel, we witness a narrator who moves the characters and situations on at a rapid pace. The word immediately is almost as commonplace as the name Jesus, and it is Mark's signature phrase. In comparison, Matthew and Luke's gospels seem to meander. They're going to both sit a spell and talk at you a bit, going into long, rambling prose about whatever the current focus is. Mark's gospel doesn't have time for the filler, the extra, the stuff that makes a 5-minute sermon into a 20-minute sermon. You go. I talk about myself. I don't know. Mark's gospel has Jesus and the disciples traveling, preaching, teaching. They're moving. They're going at a rapid pace. And it's no wonder that by the time we reach the 7th chapter, we find a grumpy and ill-mannered Jesus. The preceding 2 chapters have begun a narrative arc. Here we go, literary people, begun a narrative arc. And we hear how Jesus has healed the daughter of an important leader of the synagogue, Jairus. His daughter is dying. He comes to Jesus, and Jesus goes with him. We hear how Jesus has fed 5,000 plus people, and we know it's more than 5,000 because the women and children weren't counted. And there were 12 baskets left over. Jesus has engaged in some serious mental maneuvering, debate team worthy arguments with the Pharisees about what foods are considered clean or unclean, but more important, where uncleanliness comes from. Jesus says, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile." All of these miracles and teachings seem almost exclusively focused on the Jewish people. Following the encounter with the Syrophoenician woman, we see an additional healing of a man who is deaf, and uttering the words, both perhaps to himself and to the man, Jesus says, "Ephatha," that is, "be opened." Ephatha. Chapter 8 includes another feeding story. Whereas before in chapter 6, Jesus and the disciples have fed 5,000 plus people. Chapter 8 includes accounting of feeding 4,000 plus people that are on the other side. Now that's a buzz phrase. They're on the other side. This on the other side crowd is most likely made up of Gentiles. And so in the middle of the healings and feedings, we see the work of the unnamed woman, determined and desperate to save the life of her child. She disregards both Jesus' vacation time and his biting words, employing the same wit and skill that he used himself upon the Pharisees. She boldly proclaims that, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." In her words, she challenged the way Jesus lived out God's message of love, healing, and justice for all creation because of the love she had for her child. Elizabeth Struthers Malbon in Women in Scripture says this: "By her bold words and persistence, her courage and cleverness, the Syrophoenician woman affects not only the healing of her daughter by Jesus, but also a significant shift in Jesus' attitude toward Gentiles." It is not a coincidence that less than 10 verses before this, Jesus speaks of cleanliness and says, "For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come. Fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, and folly. All of these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." In her plea, it is as if the Syrophoenician woman says, "Oh, Jesus, do you not believe what you espouse? Do you not follow your own teachings? Where is your compassion? Where is the good news of God in your bitter words?" Malbon continues and says, in Mark, her story is part of a larger narrative segment that recounts a detour through which Jesus leads his disciples after they fail to go on ahead of him to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, to the Gentile Bethesda. During the detour, the expansiveness of Jesus' teachings, feedings, and healing, this healing power, not only for the Jews, but also for the Gentiles, is made manifest. Jesus' encounter with the Syrophoenician woman is presented as a key to this transformation. It is the shift in the story, the turning point in the story. When I read this, I find myself asking the question over and over, who is in need of healing? Who needs healing? The first time I read it, it was very clear that the woman's child needed to be healed. It was also painfully clear how Jesus' initial rebuke was intended to be received. You and yours are not worth my time. Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. You and yours are as unclean to me as dogs. For many womanist and feminist theologians, what is powerful about this message and what they see in it is that Jesus too is in need of healing. And that in the midst of needing to be healed from his own embedded assumptions about some of the children of God, in the midst of needing to be healed from his own nation-first mentality, my own people-first comments, that Jesus' heart is moved. And it's moved by a mother's love. Reverend Catherine Matthews says, the heart of Jesus is touched and even moved in new directions, not by faith, but by love. Matthew's gospel is the one that talks about faith with the Canaanite woman, those parallel stories. But Mark's gospel doesn't talk about that. He says, your words, what you have said, your love has moved me. The mother love that is the heart of God's own love. Something deep inside Jesus remembers and recognizes this mother love. We might even say that something in Jesus' heart and mind and plans is opened up by the power of this love. This glimpse behind the curtain, exposing the fullness of humanness of Christ, is exactly what is so refreshing and perhaps scary for many. Because in his actions we see ourselves. I'm not sure about you, but I know I've been that one, tired and exhausted, just yearning for a place to rest, and someone comes asking another question, and I snap. Yet the narrative doesn't stop at the cruel intention. Jesus listens and changes. Transformation occurs in that moment because of the courage and the determination of the Syrophoenician woman. And the courage of Jesus to stop, to pay attention, to listen, and alter course. The plea of this woman and her bold claim on the overflowing, tender mercies of God, in a sense, challenged Jesus to the logical conclusion of what he has already been saying. So as he follows up his words about food with the action of feeding the others, he moves into a new space. I find great hope in this passage. One, because I think it's a miracle that it survived the winnowing of the canon, and that it actually is still there. This glimpse into a humanness of Christ that isn't a perfect depiction. See, I think we need tangible examples of what this looks like. What faith looks like, what a person of faith in an active world looks like. We need concrete examples of what it really means to miss the mark, turn around, and come back. And this story is an example of that. Many of us can see ourselves in the person of the Syrophoenician woman, especially parents or those charged with caring for someone. They could see the desperation and the need And many of us can see ourselves in Jesus, needing just a moment to rest. The truth is, part of the hope that is found here is that we are not bound by the places our society has destined for us. We are not bound by the actions of the past. We have opportunities to speak God's truth out into the world and chances to reclaim our fragmented, broken selves for movements of wholeness in this world. Beloved ones, today, let us find the courage, like the Syrophoenician woman, who boldly brought about the healing of her child and many others. Let us find the courage, like Jesus, to listen, to be willing to boldly change course so as to live fully into God's message of love. Who is in need of healing? We all are. Amen.